But let's dive into the big game of December, probably the biggest game I would arguable.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Callisto
arguably.
Protocol. The Callisto Protocol.
Yeah, for those who don't know, this is made from the original creator of Dead Space.
Yep.
His name eludes me right now.
Yeah, I
Greg
think
Schofield.
that sounds correct. Yeah, it's one of the original creators. A
Mhm.
spiritual sequel, however you want to call it. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
Glenn Schofield.
it's a kind of a Dead Space game, but also like not because it's really heavy, and I didn't realize that, but they really emphasize melee combat, which is really cool, and I think it's a really solid like combat system.
Yeah, like I've heard a lot of criticism from people who just aren't getting it, who aren't understanding the combat system, and I don't really understand why because the game it explains it to you pretty well. Where like you're dodging left and right.
Yeah,
All you have to do is hold your stick in one direction. You don't have to time it.
yeah,
You
really
all
which
the
is
only
really
thing you have to
nice.
do is yeah, especially for like the boss fights, right, where you're just
Yeah,
constantly holding it left or right. But the only thing you have to do is you have to weave left and right between hits,
yeah,
and that's kind of how you continue your dodge, and you can find an opening. But like in addition to the actual melee combat, you have like a myriad of weapons. You have 4 or 5 different weapons that you end up with, and
yeah,
those all have differing levels of effectiveness. I think there are some standouts and some kind of like dud weapons, but I guess it depends on what upgrade path you take, um, and just kind of your preference.
yeah,
But for the most part, like you have like your pistol, your shotgun, you get assault rifles or get an assault rifle, get I mean imagine like Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 3
yeah,
where you're going from your pistol to your assault rifle and the enemies are scaling with your weapons
yeah,
where you'll come across maybe 4 or 5 enemies at a time, whereas at the beginning of the game you're coming across 1 or 2. And
yeah. Yeah, because
I think
you eventually get to a point where the enemies will kind of start to mutate, and as you're attacking them, these tentacles will
Mhm.
come out of their chest, and you have to shoot them. Otherwise, they'll transform into an even stronger enemy, and they'll murder you. They'll kill you in like 2 hits. Um, so I mean,
yeah,
the game. So this is where like I see a lot of criticism um, for the melee, because I mean there's definitely like early on melee is super emphasized. Like you don't even get your first actual gun until like an hour and a half in. Um, and they definitely
hmm
wanted you to like shoot, dude, or really start off with a melee if you can. Start with a melee. There'll be like a kind of a quick time, kind of like a quick time trigger where like a reticule will go up on an enemy's like one of their weak points, and you just tap L and then R, and you'll shoot him, and then you can continue on with your
hmm
combo if it doesn't kill them. Depending, I mean, you might be able to get 2 or 3 shots off. Just kind of depends. So it's really all about timing, but um, the game's hard. I mean, it's a hard. I mean, it's a pretty
yeah.
hard game. Like if you're not dodging, I mean, because the
And if
enemies.
you're
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead, you go ahead.
So there are some enemies like that will shoot projectiles at you, but for the most part, they're up in your face. Um, and it can be a little overwhelming when there's like 3 or 4. Like it's really hard to kind of dodge because you don't necessarily have like a lock on mechanic, but if you like tap the right stick left or right, it'll start to kind of like auto lock onto some enemies. So that can be a little bit jarring when you got one in your face and
Yeah.
then it swings you at like 180 to a one behind you. Like that's a little frustrating. But by the time you get to the midpoint of the game, like you've got like a hand shotgun, I guess is what I call it, and then you've got like a
Yeah.
regular shotgun. So kind of towards the middle of the game, like you're really, or at least I was like doing less hand to hand combat and more gun focus, just because there's so many
hmm
enemies coming at you, and you honestly you get a lot of ammo in that area where you meet the blind enemies. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And then of course you have like your like telekinesis
yeah,
power
yep,
thing as well, and that helps a ton
Yes,
in
yes.
the midsections of the game. And like some of my favorite moments of the game is when it traps you in a room with like all these environmental hazards
Yeah.
and all this heavy machinery, and it's like, okay, you know what to do.
Yep.
So I'm just like throwing them left and right into these things, and it's just that was like the first time that happens. I don't know if you remember it, but like you go into this room, it shuts down, and then you like turn on the power upstairs, and then you go downstairs, and
Mhm.
there's like
Yep.
two rotating uh vestibule or whatever, two rotating things. And it was like super intense because it's like 3 minutes of enemies kind of like
Yeah.
slowly coming at you.
Pro tip,
And
I died on that spot a few times, and then what I did was I ran through the little kind of doorway it gives you, and then all the enemies spawned on the other side. So I was just
Mhm.
pulling them through and just eating them up in the
Oh, nice.
in the teeth of the whatever. But yeah, I mean the game is it's one of the most prettiest games I've ever played. I think like this, like look wise, maybe not
Yeah.
necessarily performance wise because it does stutter a lot, um, or at least that's what I encountered. But just visually, it looks amazing. It looks like kind of looks like the first like really new next gen game. I think. Um,
Yeah. I would say
God of
that.
War was pretty close. Like God of War looks fantastic, but it looks amazing on my PS4. So it can only look so much better on a PS5. Lighting and stuff like that. But yeah, this game looks really it looks amazing. The atmosphere is kind of what you would expect from like a spiritual successor to Dead Space.
Mhm.
Like the sound design is incredible. It's creepy. It kind of keeps you on your toes. I wish it was a little bit scarier, to be honest. It's not a super
It
scary game. They kind of cop out with a lot of like jump
s-
scares.
stupid jump scares of the things jumping out of the chests like
Yeah, they
all the time.
have. Yeah, they do it a lot. Like Dead Space, I remember they only did it a few times. But with this, I mean, like, it's at least like 10 to 15 that I've encountered so far between like the
Mhm.
lockers and the chests and stuff like that. Which can be kind of annoying because like sometimes you need that health, and they kind of they'll
Yeah.
take like a little sliver off. Usually they drop like the
30%
yeah,
health
like
or
a thirty five
something like
percent
that.
health whatever. So yeah, they cop out on those like jump scares that aren't super great. 'Cause I don't think I've jumped once in the game, to be honest, but yeah.
No,
But I kind of
unfortunately.
expect it. I see it all coming. Like, oh, dead person laying on a gurney. Oh, he's coming up and he jumps up. So
Yeah. It's very predictable. And I was watching an interview with the director, and he was like, "Listen, horror is hard. You only have one shot to scare somebody
yeah,
because once you scare them, they're immune to it. Essentially, if they go back and play it again, they're not going to be scared."
yeah,
So he was like, "It's super hard. It's super hard to make a horror game." And I can see that. Like I can see like where he kind of struggled to, or where the team struggled to make this actually scary.
yeah,
It's got like a scary environment. They do a really good job of like kind of world building and kind of setting the scene and then having these like crazy settings. But the actual horror aspect just it doesn't hit how it did in Dead Space.
yeah, yeah,
And speaking specifically about like Dead Space 1 and 2.
yeah.
But
And even Dead Space 2 was less horror. It was more
mhm,
action based. But yeah, that first Dead Space was pretty creepy. And Dead Space
yeah.
2 had that one school area with like the baby necromorphs. So I mean, there was some definitely some
Mhm.
scary parts of Dead Space. Um, but yeah, I mean, that being said, like I think like I've enjoyed the combat. Um, there has definitely been some frustrating times with just dealing with like the camera thing that they got going on with that automated camera. Um, I think once you, I guess another pro tip, definitely go in the skill tree. Go for the baton. That's like the main melee weapon in the game.
Mhm.
Get the upgrade where you could break people's arms when they block you. That's huge to have. I don't know if
Oh,
you
I never
have
got
that.
that.
Yeah, it's huge. Like you go to swing and they'll block you still, but it'll break their arm and do damage, and it'll kind of go right through them, and then you can continue on with your combo.
Actually, I do think I have that.
Um, so that was super useful. Um, like, yeah, again, and then just use that. the telekinesis type power that you get, because when you're just able to just yank people and throw them off the
Hmm.
side of a cliff or a bridge or something, like super useful.
It's
uh
helpful.
yeah, it you can upgrade that too, and get recharge and stuff like that. It's not as giving as it is in like Dead Space. Like Dead Space, you can kind of use that stuff all the time, just about. And this, you definitely can't. Like, you'll use it
It's
two or
got a
three
battery.
times. Yeah, you'll use it 2 or 3 times in like one encounter, and that's it. Um, and then
Yeah,
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 it recharges over time, but it's not as like I said, not as giving as it is in Dead Space.
yeah. I heard some reviewers say that the telekinesis trivialized everything else, and I don't think that's true at all. I don't think it made the game too easy. I don't think like that's not the only thing you can use. You have to use melee to an extent. You have
Yeah,
to use your weapons a ton. I mean, towards the end of the game, like
I mean, it
it,
might, like the early parts. It might, it certainly makes it a lot easier when you can just kind of take, because at that time, at that point in the game, you're only fighting 2 to 3 enemies at a time, so you can definitely like use that and knock out enemies. Um, but yeah,
yeah.
going forward, like I was using a mixture of everything, like melee, telekinesis when I could.
Hmm.
Sometimes like I would just pick one up and throw a guy just to get him out of my face for a second, and then I would wail on someone else. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it trivializes the game at all. I don't think it makes it any more easy. It's definitely like just another kind of tool. Um, I mean,
Right.
the main focus is really just dodging. Just get that mechanic down.
Yeah. That's
It took me about an hour and a half um, for it to click, and once it did, uh, not gonna say it was smooth sailing, but it was a lot better. It was a lot better for
felt
me.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like going back to comparing it to Dead Space, I think, and I've for context, I finished the game yesterday and played it on Series X. The first half of the game reminds me a lot of Dead Space One,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that claustrophobic feeling. Maybe not as maybe not done as well as Dead Space One, but still impactful and still really enjoyable.
Yeah.
And the second half is like going straight to Dead Space 3. And there's a transitional point that you might think of where like you hit it and you're like, oh man, this feels exactly like Dead Space
Oh,
3.
you talking about the snow?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because at that point you have quite the arsenal of weapons,
Yeah.
and that's a really hard thing to do in a horror game. Is like you're upgrading your weapons, you're getting new ones. At a certain point, you're going to be overpowered. So how do people combat that? They throw more enemies at you,
Yeah.
or they throw stronger enemies at you, or they throw bullshit bosses at you, like they do in the latter third of that game. And
Yeah.
you've experienced those, so
I definitely think right now, I think the first half of the game is pretty strong. And the latter half is kind of weak for me right now. Mainly because of those bosses are so not necessarily bad, but man, like they'll kill you in one hit, like legitimately. If you do not dodge, they will get you in one hit, which was it's just terrible. So, I guess so.
yeah.
All that said, being said, that I like about the game, um, it's obviously, it kind of runs choppy at some points. Like it's not smooth a lot of the time. Um, I think Jacob feels pretty clunky. Like he doesn't feel super
Mhm.
quick. Like you sit there and try to. There's been times where if you get surrounded by enemies, like you're pretty much screwed. Like if you, I mean, you can run away, but like by the time you turn around, because there's not like a quick turn button either.
It needs to be a quick turn.
So, and that's my biggest
Desperately.
thing is I feel like they didn't focus test this game with people. Like I don't think people outside of the development played it, because there's no quick turn, which is like number one thing you
Necessary.
need in a survival horror game. So there's no quick turn when you die. Like, so the dying sequences are sometimes pretty long, in which you can press start and hit restart checkpoint. I do that all the time now. But if you die, it just goes to like a black screen, and there's no text. There's no like helpful
Mm.
helpful tip. There's nothing like that. which isn't a huge deal, but I mean, like every game does that, so like why not have something like that there? Um, and then like the audio logs, you have to go into the menu and listen to them. They don't just
Sit there
automatically
and listen to
play.
them.
Like that's 2008 Dead Space or whatever. Like how
Yeah.
is that? Like I love like the audio logs. I mean that's been in every game since BioShock and Dead Space. Like it's so cool to go into a room, see some dead bodies, and you're like, what the hell happened here? And then you hear the audio log and you find out what happens, or you fall along a trail of this person. They end up getting killed inevitably. But um, I listened to like the first maybe 15, and then I was like, I'm not gonna listen to this anymore because it's just granted
Yeah.
they're 15 seconds, 20 seconds, but like I don't want to have to go into the menu every time.
So the director mentioned this as well. He said, and I might be butchering this, but he said he didn't want to take people out of the moment and
I don't agree with that at all.
take away the fear factor of actually playing the game like in silence or whatever. But
They're
the
10
problem with that
seconds. They're 15 seconds. Like
is that games have already solved that. You just give people the option to play them when they
yeah,
pick them up, and you don't have to hold A to play them. You can keep moving on.
yeah. You just like hold
Just
up
let
on the D-pad or something, like play now
yeah,
or whatever.
like why not include that? I think you're onto something in that this game wasn't play tested outside of their company,
Yeah.
outside of their internal studio, and it's apparent in that kind of stuff, especially in the bosses, which
Yes.
are like I said, they're pretty bullshit.
And I've only encountered two bosses now, I guess, but I've fought the same one 3 times now, and it's again
Yeah,
it's a melee boss. Well, I guess they're all melee, but if it touches you, you're dead, which is insane. Um, but I mean, it makes sense. It's a bigger enemy, and obviously, if it gets a hold of you, it's gonna kill you. But and it's pretty like so. My biggest frustration, and it really came into play when I was fighting that boss, is I think okay. So two things actually. So health. The way you restore health is you kneel down and you inject like this liquid into your neck. Like, why can't you just do that on the
do
like?
that.
Why'd you have to kneel down to do that? Just stick it in your neck and go on. Like, take like 2 seconds to like, like Dark Souls. You chug a flask for 2 seconds and you're vulnerable. But like, why not do that instead of making people kneel down? That doesn't make
Because
any sense.
you can't heal during a fight.
No, there's no way.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Not that you need to for these bosses because they kill you in one hit, but when you have other people coming at you
Yeah.
while this boss is chasing you, it makes it a little bit annoying.
Yeah. And then so yeah, in just terms of like realism, like you wouldn't kneel down and inject. You would just and then go
Yeah,
on
like,
because
let's
it's
go.
it's it's
Like
fight or
I gotta
flight.
run.
Um, hold on, I gotta shut my door.
And the
Sorry.
game also needs a weapon wheel.
Yes, that was my second thing. Is I
Yeah.
died so many times on that boss because I was trying to switch to another weapon, and it's got like a quick select that you just double tap, but I never know what's actually in my quick select.
It doesn't work.
I
It straight up just doesn't work
like
sometimes.
I try to go into the menu and put something in there onto but the main shotgun was already there. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
well that's fine. Like I usually use the shotgun, so I'll keep that there, and then just have whatever like when I pick it. But then no, then I got the assault rifle, and the assault rifle took its place, and then I was like, I don't understand. And then um, I kept dying because I didn't know. Maybe this is on me, but like I couldn't remember what the weapons looked like because they don't tell you the names of
Oh, dude,
them when
no
you're
idea.
selecting them.
They
So
all
I
look the
kept
same.
I kept trying to get like the not the hand cannon because that's like the pistol, but like the hand shotgun. I kept trying to get that one, and I kept picking like that or like the tactical pistol or something like that. So super frustrating. Like I spent probably 95% of dying on that specific boss because I was just trying to switch a weapon and I couldn't, and I was getting so frustrated. And you can't
Yeah.
pause and select it. You just have to do it on the fly. And guns take like it takes a while to switch them. So man, yeah,
Yeah, like I don't know how that I don't know how any of those boss fights, maybe except for the first one, I don't know how any of them made it out of playtesting because for starters, and this might be just my opinion, but I don't think you need bosses in a survival horror game sometimes. I think you can
Yeah.
just have it be an experience. Like sometimes bosses are just kind of overbearing and kind of take you out of the experience. Whereas like honestly, I loved like the stealth section and like parts like that were more riveting to me. Like I really enjoyed those sections. I really enjoyed the first half. I even enjoyed a lot of the back half aside from the boss fights.
Yeah. And
But
I think that's what it really is those boss fights have just kind of soured
it kind
my
of sours it a little bit.
yeah, sours my taste of that a little bit cuz um yeah, I mean obviously like Resident Evil I think has really good boss fights for the most part. And then like the first Dead Space, like you had like the big like kind of juggernaut enemies that were considered the boss fights. And then you had like the stalker or whatever it was, like the one that couldn't die, the regenerator or whatever it was in the original Dead Space. That was super creepy and super tense, and I expected them to have something like that here, and maybe they will. I don't know. I haven't finished the game yet, but um, yeah, I don't think boss fights are needed. And this one, in concept, it's really cool because it's a two-headed boss, and when you attack one of the heads and essentially kill it, it'll rip it off, and then it's a little bit
Hmm.
quicker. So it's a really cool, but the fact that the arenas are really small that you're in, you're having to constantly dodge, which is fine. That's the main mechanic of the game. But just that weapon swapping is awful. They should have just put it on a D-pad, like you know, or have like the
Yeah.
pistols like on like you double click the bottom D-pad and it'll swap between those, or and then have your shot again, like I mentioned, like playtesting.
Yeah.
I've never really mentioned playtesting in the game ever, and this is very very apparent that there was not. Um,
Yeah. They should have moved run to the thumbstick, to clicking on the thumbstick, and then left the left bumper open for weapon wheel. You could
yeah,
have held that down, had a little slow mo or whatever, like they do in like literally every other game,
yeah,
and it's perfect in every other game. It
yeah.
works. Why not do that? Why like yeah, okay.
But see that's what sucks though is like the everything else about the game I've really enjoyed. Like I love the combat. It's just the weapon wheel, and maybe it's not even the fact it's not even that boss like the one hit boss whatever. It's just the weapon wheel or the weapon or the lack of. Like it's frustrating to have to hold the left or right stick button or hold it in one direction and then
Mhm.
on the D-pad try like my fingers are hurting because I'm trying to. I know it's not that big of a deal, but I mean the fact that we both died a lot because of that
Yeah.
specific circumstance. Yeah, they should have. Yeah, they should have play tested it.
And like I'd have so many times where like I thought I had switched weapons, and
Yeah,
then I go to shoot. I'm like, this is the same gun.
yeah, because you have to
Not
you have to
even-
hover over it. You have to click A, but I think I don't know what I do. Like I hover over it and I click it, and then yeah, like you said, like I go to shoot and like I've got no ammo. I'm like, I'm like, what the hell? Like I just switched. So
It's like
I
it
don't know.
needs a second. Like you need to.
You have to give it a second for you to actually put it away and pull it out. I've noticed.
That's dumb.
Yeah,
I understand the commitment to realism, and this game is very realistic in that sense. But at a certain
come
point,
on,
you
just
have
let it
to
happen.
sacrifice realism and make it more of a game.
Yeah,
And that's where they need to do that
because
is
you'll
with
sit there and like try to switch to your gun, and then you've got to dodge, and that dodge counteracts the gun movement of,
yes,
of pulling it
yes,
out.
so
And then
many
you're
times.
like, and then you're just constantly stuck in this never ending battle of just trying. You're fighting with your guns. That's what you're. That's the true enemy of the game.
And it's not a problem like 80% of the time. It's just on the boss fights.
Yeah, because I mean, because most of the time, like when you're fighting like a horde of enemies or whatever, you've got enough firepower to take them out with what you've got,
Yeah.
what you got equipped. So again, very minor things that are huge in the very latter half of the game because that's where the boss fights come into play, and it's just frustrating because
God, you're gonna hate the last boss.
yeah, I'm sure I will.
You're gonna hate it. I turned it down to easy
Did
on
you
the last
really? Oh
boss.
God.
Also, there's no achievement for beating it on medium
Oh,
versus
then I'll
easy. So
probably yeah, I'll probably definitely take it down then. And then there's one weird area, like kind of in the start of the second half of the game where, and again, I don't know. Again, playtesting, I don't know if it just didn't make sense or, but you're there. You come to this like kind of construction area, and there's this guy. He's like a worker. He's like, hey, I'm trapped in this. He's like, come open this door for me. And then
Mm,
he's like, and then it's like a big combat arena. You can already tell. And he's like, help
yeah.
me out, and I'll give you the code or whatever, and we'll get out of here. And 10 seconds go by, and he's like, did you find anything to get the door open? And then monsters come, and you kill them, and then you have to wait for a monster inside of the room to kill this guy for the door to open, because the monster will then open it. It doesn't explain it, because even like on like the quest line, it says like try and help the worker escape. And I spent so much time trying to figure out where he was, and there's no
Yeah.
silhouette in the window where he came from. So I was like, what? What is this, man? I died like 30 times in that part just trying to.
Really?
Yeah, like I died so much because I was trying to find the guy, and then I just kept getting killed because I just was sucking. But yeah, I was really
Yeah.
frustrated at that part
Oh man, I had like no problems with that part.
because I just didn't
I
know what
just
to do.
I used all the explosive barrels
But yeah,
to
that's what I did.
okay.
Um, but I spent a lot of time just trying to figure out what this guy was, and then I kept dying, and I was like, well, am I just not doing something right? Am I? Are the enemies supposed to be coming out? I don't know.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, again, I really like the game. Do I think it's better than Dead Space One?
No.
We'll see. We'll see how it comes. In January. But I don't think it is. I think it's a really good attempt at
Yeah.
something like Dead Space. And we don't get a lot of them, so that's why I was so excited for this game. So I think it's really good. Um, if you don't, I would buy it on a platform where you can return it, because if you don't dig the combat, like the dodge mechanic, you're not gonna get through this game. It's just you're not going to.
Yeah. If you don't figure it out, if you don't vibe with it,
Yeah,
you're gonna hate the game.
yeah,
But I don't know why the combat system has gotten so much hate. I think positioning is a big part of this game, and like people, I don't know. I just feel like people aren't positioning themselves well, like in arenas and
yeah.
like with the enemies. They're like they're saying that enemies keep coming up behind them, but that really didn't happen to me that much.
Yeah,
Like
there were some times where that would happen.
it happened a few times, but it was never.
But that happened in Dead Space, like because they would come to the vents.
Yeah.
So I don't really get that kind of gripe with the game. There was really one really cool moment that was like kind of like terrifying. I think it was right before you get to the blind enemies, but you kind of come down, like the floor is caved in, and you're standing up on the platform and you're looking down. There's like 4 or 5 enemies, and I started shooting them, and then they all started running, and I was like, where did they go? So I jumped down, and they had all gone into the same vent, and I was standing there, and all I heard was like 10 guys like coming to the vent at the same time, and I was like, oh my god. And then it was just like a bloodbath. It was really awesome. So yeah, there's some cool moments in the game, and like the environment kills are really cool and fun, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just bogged down by just, I'm assuming, his lack of playtesting for a lot of these areas. So I don't know.
Yeah, it seemed a little rushed.
Yeah,
That being said, I have a soft spot for survival horror,
yeah, I do
and
too.
I really enjoyed this game outside of the boss fights.
Yeah,
This might end up in my top 10 just because I love this genre so much, and it's really hard to do a game like this. But I feel like they did it pretty well, aside from all the gripes that we have, which is more than normal for a game. But
yeah, but it all revolves around like the weapon swapping. I think that's just
yeah,
so
if they can
bad.
fix that,
Yeah,
then
or it's just if they
we'll
could
get
just make it like half a second quicker to swap,
Mhm.
um, or put it on like a weapon wheel, like you said, where you can slow down time for like whatever, that
Yeah.
would be huge to the game. So again, everything else great. Just fix the weapon swap and I'm good.
Yeah, and also I tweeted this out earlier, but this game really needs a new game plus.
There's
It
not
needs
one.
no, it's coming
Oh,
later.
oh,
But
it's
it
coming later.
needs
Okay,
post game unlockables like Resident Evil has, where
that's
like you
like
get like these badass weapons, and you look forward to the next playthrough because you're like, okay, this boss that I hated and this boss that sucked, I can probably kill it in like a minute
that's like that
with the same
again.
weapon.
The quick turning, like the 180 quick turn, and New Game Plus awesome weapons is like
That's like horror game 101.
that's 101 right there. Like that's so frustrating.
Yeah, like it's really frustrating because I would want to play this game again
Yeah, because it's not a
if
long
it had New Game
game.
Plus. No, it was like 7 hours,
Yeah,
and that doesn't include all my deaths.
yeah.
But so it's probably like more around like 8 or
And
9.
also, I guess my last gripe with the game is the manual saves aren't actually manual saves.
No, it doesn't take you back to that point.
Yeah,
I
which
don't
is
know what the
very
point of it is.
dumb. I mean, it saves all the time. So like, I've never been in a situation where I've had to backtrack too much. So finally, after like the first 2 times, I was like, why am I not at the same exact spot where I saved? I just left it on. Like I just quick resumed whatever, and it worked and it was fine. But yeah, that was a little annoying too. But
Again, playtesting.
yeah, like why wouldn't you? Why would you have a manual save option? But I don't know. Game's really good. If you like survival horror, like it's solid. It's $70, which in the news here, that's going to be the norm going forward. So
Yeah, and maybe we're liking it a little bit more because we split the cost
yes,
since
we
we have
do
game
have the
sharing.
game, yeah, the game sharing. Which if you've got a family member or a good friend that you trust having your information, do it, man. It's awesome. Game sharing is great.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
super great.
We paying $30 for Elden Ring was the biggest steal of the year.
I genuinely feel like I committed a crime and
Like
got
a
away with it.
criminal.